Alright, welcome back. We're going to play another game of chess here using our normal time control. And let's see what we get. We have a 1700 and we're playing against the white pieces here. We're playing with the black pieces. So it looks like we're going into a Sicilian defense, and I'm going with the normal second move d6 here, inviting the game to go into a Najdorf style game. So we will see what our opponent plays here. The book response is now d4, opening the game up, but there's several ways that white can play this. And we have a little bit of waiting time on the third move. Alright, so we have d4 as expected, and we take, following the book line here, into the Najdorf with 5a6. So it looks like we have a Najdorf here. And white can choose from a variety of ways to attack the Najdorf here. The book move here is bishop g5, but there's also the English attack, bishop e3, and bishop e2 is probably the second or third most common move. And the response to bishop e2 is e5 here. And this goes into the Opushenski variation, as it is called. And here there is a fork in the road. White can move their knight back to f3 here or to b3, and that will tell us kind of in what style our opponent is looking to play this opening. So now we can move our bishop to e6, and the point of bishop to e6 is we want to cover this d5 square here, which can be very important. In these variations, we can also move bishop e7, looking to castle. I will probably honestly go bishop e6 first here, looking to cover the d5 square, because this square can sometimes be weak when you have what is called this Boleslavsky hole formation with your pawns, indicating that you have a weak pawn on d6 here. And that happens when you push e5 most of the time in Najdorf. So now we can develop our other bishop to e7. I don't see a reason why we can't go for bishop e7 and castling here. So we will likely do that. And white actually still has the option to transpose this in a way, kind of to an English attack after the move bishop e3. So this move also will invite white either to castle or to play queen d2, which would signify maybe they want to play this like opposite side castling here, a move like g4, g5. Maybe they want to attack on the king side with a pawn storm here. So we will see what our opponent's intention is here after bishop to e3. And positionally, probably castling is better. It goes into a more even game. Tactically, queen d2 can be dangerous for both sides here. Queen d2 looking to castle queen side here, and then both sides will initiate a pawn storm towards each other's kings. So we will see what our opponent opts for here in this game. It's left up to him. And we don't have to stress about any of these variations yet. We can only start calculating moves when they happen. So queen to d2, it looks like our opponent still might have the intention of castling long here and sort of transposing it into into an English attack in a way, with the move bishop e2 thrown in. So the move bishop e2 actually is kind of like an English attack, but it's taken a tempo out of the English attack. And we can go through this like more after the game. I think for now I will look at castling, developing my knight to d7 here, and pushing b5 because of how white has played this. Because normally in the English attack, you put bishop e3, queen d2 right away without even developing your light square bishop. So this has taken a tempo out of setting up this pawn storm here by playing this Opportunity. He can still castle kingside, but then he is not really positionally the same as if he had gone for a classic Opashensky setup here. So now we have castling, and this signifies to me clearly he wants to start this kingside pawn storm here, and it's an opposite side castling game. It's going to be very tactical. So let's start with knight to d7 here, and my pawns are going to reach the white kingside here before my pawns will reach white's kingside here before white has a chance. And we can just calculate that very simply. If he had played g4, it's not possible because knight takes. But we can look at this more after the game. For now, my intention is kind of very clear in this game. You want to initiate this pawn storm. How can we initiate it? Obviously with a move b5, right? Sicilian players should be like itching to play these moves like this when you have an opposite side castling situation. You want to just start storming the kingside with the pawns, throwing the pawns this way. And we will have to judge. So we made the first pawn move. We will have to judge like how we will go about the rest of this attack here. But you can see if he doesn't protect this pawn with something like f3 here, we're able maybe to kick this knight away and capture this pawn, this loose pawn on e4. So now defending this pawn is also something he should think about here. Playing f3 and then supporting g4 here is definitely a maneuver that white should be wanting to do here. So now we have to decide how we want to proceed here, because if we play b4, likely white will move the knight to d5, and that is not the end of the story. We can capture, and after captures here, we can perhaps play something like knight to b6 here, looking to put pressure on this pawn and also threaten to jump into c5. So I think b4 hits the spot and is very it's very thematic, shall we say, in these sort of like opposite side castling positions. And we could even, delay taking this knight and maybe reinforce b4 with a5 here. So I think starting with b4 is probably pretty good here. It's probably, I can sense it is pretty good. Maybe rook c8 was also a thematic move, very thematic as well. But b4 is probably not bad at all here. And we have our opponent burning a little bit of time here. But this, I would say, is more similar to an English attack than an Opashensky variation at this point. And I will explain why probably after the game. But here, so what is white threatening? Obviously, white can take this pawn here, is one threat on the board. They also they've placed their knight here, but they are also, I guess they're not threatening to jump in here because we can simply take with the queen. So one thing we can do we could think about doing is pushing d5 in this position, trying to get this central pawn break, since we've diverted the knight away and it didn't come down to d5 itself. So d5, and after takes, the queen is not able to recapture, obviously, because it's defended. So I think d5 is quite thematic as well. And notice how we're not losing our other central pawns here. d5 is quite thematic. Once you've, accomplished kind of a goal on the flank here of diverting the attention away from the center, now we counter strike back in the center. And this is a balance between, king side attack and also can we hit white back like in other places on the board where it hurts. So I think d5 is a move that kind of hurts here, white, in a way. And if knight comes down to here, I think we have the move maybe d4, disconnecting this knight from the defense of the bishop and also taking up more space here. But we'll have to calculate that maybe after it happens. Knight to c5 is probably a valid move. But notice how we've also, the move d5 also connects this bishop to the pawn, so the queen now cannot take the pawn. But kind of a complicated position, a little bit of things going on here in this position. So it makes sense that both the opponent and I are taking our time in this middle game position here. It would make sense to take time in a position like this, since there's quite a bit going on, and you can tell that the moves are affecting the game in probably a great manner here. You can sense that this position is very much more tense than a lot of moves in the opening could have been. So our opponent taking their time with this move. Okay, we have pawn takes d5, and now we have the choice of to take back with a bishop or the knight. And I think it's pretty clear to me that I want to take back with a knight here. And the reason is because it's pretty simple. We hit this bishop here, and that's a problem for white, I think, if they don't have as much of a grip on the dark squares here. So I think taking with the knight is far more potent than taking with the bishop. The bishop still points to the king side here, even though it's behind the knight. So it doesn't really, I don't really need my bishop pointing this way toward the other queen side pawns. But we can, I guess, analyze it after the game. I think taking with the knight is pretty clearly a more correct choice here. And then we'll have to judge how to proceed in this position. It is very, I guess, unclear to me whether I should at this point be continuing a kingside attack in some manner or trying to otherwise divert my pieces into like a more into just more activated squares now. So I think bishop to c5, the point is we can't, we probably, so we're faced with, we can either take with the bishop here, we can take with the knight, and I think taking is the best option here. And the reason is that we don't want like to move the bishop and lose our rook here. And we also, we probably don't want to take with a bishop and let the knight get in to a better square here after the exchange. So I think taking with the knight in exchange for the bishop is good. And now we will decide how we have to proceed here. We can maybe play knight f4, hitting this bishop. We can take here, but then the other knight comes in. So I don't really like the prospect of taking, to be honest. We can play a5 here, is kind of interesting. Because after takes, the pawn reinforces this knight, I guess. I think I'm going to go with a5. Getting this pawn chain together for now. And after takes, we intend to take back with the pawn here, if takes with the bishop. And then we will have opposite colored bishops is something we want to keep in mind after this position. And I think a5 also gets a step closer here, let's say after this trade, to making my pawns come in contact with this king side here. And you should be like feeling in this position that like if we're able to open this king side and get like our rooks back here, there will be hell to pay for white, like hell to pay that they haven't been able to match their expansion on our queen side here, or yeah, our king side. They haven't been able to do an equal pawn storm on this side of the board. So you should be feeling like there'll be hell to pay if we're able to open this king side, and a4 is now a threat to do that. A4. And after a4, I think the knight will have to drop back to a spot like, well, a4 now might come with less effect, and that is due to the prospect of bishop takes here, queen takes here, rook takes. But rook cannot take at the end of the line is the issue, because let's say we have a4 here, 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 and then we take. The knight is still hanging, and the knight cannot come here. It cannot come forward. It has to go back, and then we have two very nice central pawns there at the end of that line. So I think a4 is pretty devastating, and this pawn is still guarded very nicely by our pieces here. So a4. Very thematic here, I think. Very nice. And he cannot move into either of these squares forward. He cannot move here. So I think taking with the pawn is correct. Or, sorry, taking with the queen is correct. And actually offering up a queen trade. However, do we have to do that? I don't think we even have to do that. I think maybe we can keep the queens on the board here. Because after takes, let's say queen takes, we take, and then the rook cannot take. Actually, yeah, I think I like keeping the pawns in the center. So I think queen takes a little bit more accurate, because the queen is going to take with check anyway if we take with the pawn. So that is the difference that I'm noticing that we want to take with the queen here. After queen takes, pawn takes, rook cannot take because the knight is still hanging here. And now we have a very nice central position here. So, yeah, he does not want to take here because he's realizing, oh, like I'm going to get, he doesn't want me to have this big center here to rectify my pawn structure. But now is the opportunity, I think, to be trying to open this king side, I feel like. So we can go rook to d8 is one possibility to try to like manually rectify this pawn structure. We could also try striking here, but after, I think b3 is maybe a blunder because takes, and it's guarded by the knight, oddly enough. So, and I don't see any follow-up that actually justifies us losing a pawn here. White just closes the position, and then we got a backward pawn here, and we got some problems. So I think activating our rook here is kind of appropriate to try to force this like exchange positionally, and we're still guarding our pawns here. So let's play rook d8. We're trying to play this now a little bit positionally here. We're trying to get now the center and exploit the fact that our pieces have some slightly better, more active squares. So now we can see that white is not really cooperating here. He's moving his queen out of the way here. But now maybe we can play queen here. And after rook takes, maybe bishop takes, and everything is still defended, and then we still have the prospect of playing b3 unless white closes it himself with b3. But then I think we have bishop back here, and white still has problems that he has to reckon with. Is there any better way to deal with this? Is a valid question. Let's play queen to a5 is what my instinct is telling me to play here to make this difficult. Guard this pawn. And I believe we want to take back with a bishop here to keep this double stack. But it's hard to say. It is a little bit hard to say. We could, as an alternative, maybe play here. Okay, so now he's attacking this with tempo is one thing we can note here. So we can play rook here, and the same idea is that if this happens, we're like forcing white in a way to trade unfavorably here. So I think rook d5 in that regard looks appealing. He's also discouraging us now with his queen. We could play something like rook c8 here, hitting his queen with tempo. But the issue with that is it blunders this pawn, right? We have to look at where his queen is actually going. We could even play king f7 here is also another interesting prospect. But after trading, I don't know where this is really, if it's going somewhere positive. So I think rook to d5 here is probably the move I'm going to go with. Again, asking white to trade on positive terms for us. To take is a mistake is one thing that some grandmasters say, and that means you should only trade when it is positive terms for yourself, and I don't think this trade is on positive terms for white here. He could play like knight to d3 here, putting pressure on this pawn and this pawn, but that disconnects his rook, and now his rook is really passive. So in response to that, maybe we could play something like here. So now it's funny because king f7 is like a very legit option that I'm seeing in response to this now, because it defends the pawn, but in a way that's kind of like non-goofy, because if he takes with a rook, we can still take here. And if we get hit with any check, which I don't even think we can, maybe this check. Yeah, what about this check? Because if we defend, he takes here, and then we got bamboozled a little bit. We could also play rook to rook here. Rook here, guard this pawn. And then takes. We might be facing an issue with like queen here or rook there. No, wait. Queen there. I think we can solidify with something like bishop to f6. So I think this is still fine. And we're still looking to come in contact with the king side here, with not the king side, but it's actually the queen side. We're still looking to come in contact with white's king here. His king pawns guarding the king, I should say. And we're looking to open a file or a diagonal in which we can get our pieces in here. So queen here, obviously hitting the pawn. We defend the pawn. We defend the pawn here. All right, and then now I think is a good time to play something like bishop to f6, reinforcing this, and get towards a kind of active diagonal here. So we notice we don't even have to play bishop f6, because if knight takes, we can just take, and then there's no follow-up. So we might even want to use this tempo to try to open this position here, to be honest, because here, but then I feel like this is going to be devastating, because we can like double rooks, we can trade, and then yeah, I think b3 here is kind of devastating. I think b3 is a little bit devastating. And the knight is not threatening to go, I don't think, anywhere useful. So I think I'm going to actually leave my bishop on e7, matter of fact, and I'm going to play b3 here and use this tempo to something that I think is a little bit more useful here. And notice how we still guard this pawn here, right? Because takes, they obviously don't want to take, because then they're getting blown to all hell on a1 here. They're getting blown to smithereens, right? Like I said, it was going to be hell to pay if we're able to open up this king side. And I think b3 is like almost like prying it open with a crowbar here. But we'll see what our opponent has in mind in response to this. We're going to take the crowbar to the position here, the b pawn. As we can see in a lot of Najdorf games, the b pawn can be lethal here. And this pawn is still well defended. Yeah, I don't think moving the bishop too hastily would have actually been too good there in that position. And our pieces, I think, are very happy here on the squares they're at. They're a lot more active, at least, than white's knight is kind of sad here. You can see it can't go forward. White's rooks are still like, and my rooks are out here on like in the middle of the board, which is kind of crazy. The bishop is the only piece that's like kind of you can feel is not as happy as it could have been, but it's still playing kind of an important role here. you can sense. So we have the queen now coming back to c4, and I think maybe he wants to deliver this check here. And does that check have any merit? Well, let's see. Well, first of all, we can take, and this comes with check. We can take on either one here. So I think taking on c2 might be a little more optimal because it removes one of the defender of this knight, but also maybe even drives the queen back. But let's see. Taking on with the other pawn might be good. I think we'll take here first. I think this visually looks better to me. And now we could pile up, perhaps we could double our rooks here. We could also play a move like this, but does that run into queen here? I mean, we just play king f7, right? And there's no other follow-up. He can't take here, I don't think. So I think we can actually play here now, supported by our bishop as well, because I don't think we can successfully get away with this. We could even play something like, we could play something like queen here. I think I even like this better. It's eyeing the knight and pinning this piece, and also, yeah, that's kind of, I think I like this move pretty good. Maybe I'm getting a little bit distracted here. But the idea is this move for one. But also we're adding pressure to the knight, we're adding pressure to this pawn, we're pinning the pawn. So I think this is actually a pretty good multi-purpose move here, now that I look upon second inspection. And I'm not scared at queen c8 because I just move my king. I bomb cloud here, and like, that's not really going anywhere. If he moves back up here, I take the knight, and we're happy. So this is probably putting tremendous pressure on the opponent. We will see where he goes from here. An idea to try to win from here is now to double the rooks, because now we're hitting this knight not 2 but 3 times with the support of the queen. So let's see what our opponent will do here. All right, we have rook here, and I think maybe he's reinforcing the threat of this, but it's still guarded twice is the issue with that. It's still guarded with the rook and the queen. So rook here, maybe he's looking to reinforce it this way. Let's see. We can play for here. I think here is good, weakening the kingside structure here and putting a pawn where it is probably not desired for white here. So we're not scared of this pawn being taken for one. Or are we? Because of, yeah, I might have missed something, but we still have something like yeah, we still have something here if he takes the pawn, because I just noticed now at the end of that line, queen c8 is a check that will scoop up this rook. So maybe rook d6 was much more accurate here. But we still probably have something like this, and then this. Yeah, is this line not just losing? Let me see. Okay, take. Bishop f8. Bishop f6. Let's see. Take. Yeah, we can't. I don't think we can take. We can't take with the queen. Can we play here? Here. I think we take after take rook here. Well, no, because the knight guards. But do we have something like this? No, because of queen c. So we have this. Yeah, queen c8 here is now a serious problem. So I think take, take, take. I think we have to actually trade queens here. It's kind of a problem. But takes, he gets pinned here, so he cannot, I don't think, take. And he has to evacuate his knight here, whereupon we can reinforce this pawn here. So we're going into an endgame here. Not ideal for a knight over, but we will see how we can break through here. All right, so we have this move with a rook, and I think we can respond with the bishop here. And now things get a little bit tricky for white, actually. Because if his knight drops back here, I guess it is threatening to take this pawn. However, we can just play rook back, pinning the knight, and I don't see a way that it can be defended after that. Boom. He can defend it, yeah, with rook there, and now we can get our king up into the action here. All right, so let's get our king up here. The point of this move is that if he advances his pawn again, you'll probably lose it. Let's see. Because he cannot return here to defend it. And now that we're in some time pressure here, I am able to, I guess, set some traps for the opponent. Yeah, I'm gonna take here. Make it a little bit harder for. So now it's a pawn majority here. However, we have a bishop which is stronger than the knight, and we also have our king more active here. So we can now play something like bishop here. In order to try to infiltrate with our bishop. All right, let's hit this pawn. And it's hard for white to hold on to the pawn advantage he has here, I think, without messing up here in some way. Because of how active my king is in this endgame. Alright, so now we can induce some sort of weakness here, probably. Pawn here, here. And then the rook cannot. It can come here, but then we take, right? And then we can use our rook to potentially cut off his king. So our opponent running out of time here. It might come down to just time control being the deciding factor here. And this knight check we actually return here. Here might be a blunder because of here. But then we have check and defending. Okay. Yeah, we have that. Yeah, timeout. And I'm not sure who was actually winning there that game. That was a close game. But I think I had compensation definitely for the material that I was behind. So let's go into the game review here. I went into an endgame. That was another Najdorf-Opashensky variation, which I would say it's more similar to an English attack, that specific game. But we had e4, c5, knight f3, d6, d4, initiating the open Sicilian. And after takes, knight f6, knight c3, a6, we move on into the Najdorf variation. And bishop e2 is the Opashensky variation. And to that, you respond e5 as the book move. And then this fork in the road, white can either play this positionally or kind of tactically. And knight b3 chooses probably the more tactical route, with the bishop likely coming to e3 here if they want to transpose it into English, or they would directly go for f4 if they were like more of a pure Opashensky player. So we actually have transposed it to the English attack here. Bishop e7, queen d2, and we have castles, castles, knight b, d7 here. All book moves, all theory. And then from here, the king moved away, and that is in order to avoid this rook being eyeing the same file as a king on the c8. So we have b5 here. It's kind of glitching out, which is the top engine move, and it's very thematic here. And f3 is a little bit passive. Yeah, f4 was a way to break into the position kind of early, but this allows us some important tempo here. We played b4 here, and the knight, I think, definitely should have moved to d5. Instead, he went knight a4. I was calculating for knight d5, but yeah, I guess I should have played rook b8 or queen b8 here is what the top engine moves are. a5 as well, but I struck back with d5 here in the center, which is not bad. It's now the engine is giving it like, oh, this is like better than I thought. But takes, and then we take back with a knight was what I was calculating. And then bishop to c5, I thought definitely, trading with a knight for the bishop is kind of more principled here. You want to maintain the bishop pair if you can. And then a5 is probably not too accurate here. I probably should have moved my queen, actually, is what the engine is saying. Queen c7 wasn't on my radar because I thought, this isn't too good after takes, but I guess the queen is now eyeing some squares that I can attack here. Instead, I played a5, reinforcing this pawn chain here. Takes, and then takes. And I thought, well, even though these pawns are doubled, like this knight is good here. And we still are threatening to make contact here with these pawns on the king's side. So bishop c4, definitely an excellent move by our opponent to try to save this position. And then a4 is very thematic as well. Like we want to dig into this queen side here. We want our pawns making contact here. Now the knight either has to move to a goofy square, or the bishop taking here, which is what happened, kind of rectifies our pawn structure is what I calculated with queen takes. But I guess this would have been better actually, because the rook can't take at the end of the line. So this would actually permanently rectify our pawn structure without us needing to worry about queen takes with check. So I kind of miscalculated that line a little bit by taking with the queen. I applied that same concept, but I didn't apply it to that line, that the rook is not taking with check there. So the knight has to drop back to c1 here, and now we're about equal because of the fact I could have just played taking with the pawn there. And now things are starting to go downhill, you can see with the analysis here. But after queen e2, it's still about equal. I move my queen over to a5, and we're reinforcing our threats over here. Queen to c4, and then, rook to d5 here. Queen to g4, and I was considering king f7, but after second thought, I played rook a6 here because I saw the queen check devastating our position. And then, knight back to e3 was definitely a mistake, I guess, because it allows b3 here. b3 is pretty devastating, taking a crowbar to the position. Queen c4 is an excellent defensive resource that our opponent found here. And taking on c2 sounded, visually it looked the best here, I think. After queen takes, I should have played a3 first, probably. But instead I got distracted there. I got distracted and played queen b5, which it's not terrible. It's the third best move, but visually it just looked a little bit better to me. But a3 had more concrete reasons why it was good. So after this, I missed a win here. Rook c6, I guess, just totally devastates the entire position. I missed this win. And instead played a3. And after rook takes, yeah, I took the rook. And did I miss another one here? Yeah, why does this work? Because I was calculating this. King f7. They scoop up. Yeah, it's because of the mate in 1 on b2 there. So, yeah, always, I guess the lesson here is always calculate through to the end of your line. You say, oh, I'm losing this rook. Yeah, but if I had calculated one move further, I would have seen that I had mate there at the end of the line, and I didn't calculate one move further, even though I saw I was losing the rook. So instead, I went to trade queens and entered, blunderously into a very bad endgame here for me. So I thought I could pin this, but obviously under the time control missed the obvious fact that white can play rook d2. But we're using the fact that the bishop is strong here and also the king is active to compensate for this position. So I move my rook back, trying to, I guess, set this. Let's try a bishop to c3, which our opponent did somewhat. Go into rook takes e6. And now it's more or less equal, so we have to play this endgame very carefully here. This bishop kind of sets another trap. If the knight moves, we can now take one of these pawns. So, but that actually may have been one of the best options, because after bishop to g1, we're now provoking the weaknesses here after bishop to f2. And I advance my king up because I see that this fork we can just take there, and if rook back here we can also just take, right? So our king is making it all the way up here, and then that's nasty. Yeah, I missed just this. Yeah, so several missed wins there, but yeah, that's kind of a devious sacrifice. And then at the end of the line, our king just scoops up these pawns and wins the game. But yeah, that is the end of... That could have ended the game on the spot, but instead, bishop to d4. I didn't go for tactics, and then the game ended on time here. And I was calculating after rook to c4, rook takes b2, and then, yeah, king d3. And I was calculating that the king could protect the bishop at the end of the line. So rook takes b2, king d3, rook to b7, rook takes d4, and king takes f3. So yeah, still kind of an advantage for black here. So that was another Sicilian Opashensky game in which I missed several wins, but eventually we ended up winning on time here. Main thing there is just like calculate your tactics through to the end, I guess, is the lesson I'm learning here. And yeah, so yeah, that's kind of long enough for a video. I don't want to go into an opening analysis on the Opashensky in this video, but I've covered it before in one of my Sicilian videos. But yeah, so that will be the conclusion of my video. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe learned something from the game.